Good evening, Erev Tov. So I thought in the few minutes that we have before Maariv tonight, we'd learn through together a piece from the Mesilat Yesharim, a piece that the Ramchal wrote in his Mesilat Yesharim, Path of the Just, section which is particularly relevant to Tisha B'Av and to the time of year that we're in. So in the 18th chapter, the Ramchal talks about, he goes through the structure of the book, he goes through the Bright of Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair, going through different traits, different levels of character building, and he gets to the level of Chassidut. Chassidut, which is somewhat clumsily translated as piety, whatever piety means, but he talks about what it means to be a Chassid. Not Chassid in terms of Baal Shem Tov, Chassid in terms of pious actions. So he explains what is, first of all, he defines, as he does with all the traits, defines what this is, what do we mean when we say this level, and then he talks about how you get there and what are some of the things which one needs to do in order to achieve this, and bring some interesting historical precedents from the Tanakh and beyond, which are relevant to our time. So he says, first of all, like this, says the Mesilat Yesharim, in chapter 18, he bases it on, he brings the words of Chazal, as the Gemara in Brachot says, Ashrei Adam she'amalo b'Torah v'oseh nachat ruach liyotzro. Praiseworthy is the one who is amalo b'Torah, who exerts himself in Torah, v'oseh nachat ruach liyotzro. He gives his creator nachas, right? Nachat ruach. What he says essentially, the idea of Chassidut is this idea of giving nachat ruach to Hashem, not just being satisfied with what we have to do, not just ticking the boxes, not just doing that which is absolutely required, but going above and beyond. Obviously, going above and beyond is not always so simple to know when one should go above and beyond and when not. When a person takes on chumrah, and this is where it gets very, very tricky. When we take on a chumrah, a person takes on a stringency in something, very often being stringent in one area means we're being lenient in another area. So when do you decide which area to be stringent and which to be lenient? So he says like this. First of all, definition of the midah of Chassidut, says the Ramchal. Ha'inyan kina mitzvot hamutalot al kol Yisrael kvar yeduoten v'chovatan yedua ad hechan hi magat. It says the mitzvot which are incumbent upon everybody, that everybody already knows, that you know what you have to do, you know what's required, Taryag mitzvot. That's the same for everybody. We all know. Omnam mi sho'ev et haborei yitbarach shmo ahava amitit. Somebody who truly loves Hashem, לא ישתדל ויכוון לפתור עצמו במה שכבר מפורסם מן החובה. If you truly love Hashem, so it won't be enough for you just to tick the box and do that which you have to do, which is your obligation, אשר כל ישראל בכלל, which everybody has to do the same thing, אלא יקרה לו כמו שיקרה על בן אוהב אביו. But it will be like a son who loves his father. That what will happen? שאילו יגלה אביו את דעתו גילוי מעט שהוא חפץ בדבר מן הדברים. It happened that once upon a time the son heard from his father there's something which he likes or something which pleases him, something will make him happy. Though he didn't ask it specifically, he didn't request it, he just happened to mention in passing. So כבר ירבה הבן בדבר ההוא ובמעשה ההוא מה שיוכל. The child, hopefully, will try and do that action and try and bring that, give his father what he wants as much as he can. He only said it once, he didn't even say it, he hinted to it, he alluded to it, he heard it, by the way, nonetheless he'll do it. He understands from that, he hears between the lines, that this is what his father wants, so he will do it. Even though he didn't tell him explicitly, he knows, he understands, even though the father did not ask for it explicitly, he understands this is what is going to cause him nachat ruach, and therefore he'll do it. He won't wait for him to ask him explicitly to do it. So he says that's the same. Says the Ramchal, that can be in any relationship you have between two people, between a parent and a child, between husband and wife, between two friends, whatever it is. The one person there is a bond, there's a love for the other person in the relationship. You want to do what makes them happy, even the things they didn't ask you to do. He says that is the idea of Chassidut. That is the idea of Nachat Ruach, trying to do for Hashem that which we know that He wants. How do we know what He wants? So we understand from the Torah, from that beyond, what the spirit of the law, not just the letter of the law, going above and beyond, doing the things we don't necessarily have to do, but the things we understand that He wants from us as well. Now, as I mentioned, this is not so simple to know. You're going to go above and beyond. He says, the Ramchal says, we're not talking now about mitzvot that you have to do, obligations, letter of the law. With that, that's what you have to do. That's what the Torah commanded you. There's no question. You do it. We're talking about extra things, going above and beyond. So he says like this. He says two prakim later now, chapter 20. He says this is not always so simple to understand when and what and where Chassidut comes in. So he says like this. So when you have the inclination, or when you think you're going to engage in some act of Chassidut, an act of extra piety, don't just look at how it jumps out at you at first glance. One needs to think very carefully. One needs to think, what is this going to lead to? What are the implications? Where's it going to be down the road? What are going to be the results of this action? Sometimes it looks like it's very good. But when you think about it, you see this actually will lead to disastrous consequences down the road, and therefore don't do this. And if you do it, you'll be a sinner, you won't be a chassid. Now he gives two examples. These two examples are related to our time of year. These are both related to the Churban. He says the following. Says the Ramchal, Maseh Gedalia ben Achikam. Okay, so we know we've got Tisha B'Av coming up, not some Gedalia, that's in a few months' time. But this is the story of Gedalia ben Achikam, which was at the end of Beit Rishon, after the Beit HaMikdash has already been destroyed, and Gedalia is there as appointed as the last vestige of Jewish sovereignty in the land, and he was killed. So he says like this, if you go and you read, we're going to the whole story now, but if you go and you read the story, you would discover the following. He says, what happened with Gedalia ben Achikam? Galoi le'einenu, shemnei rov chasiduto, שלא לדון את ישמעאל לכף חובה, או שלא לקבל לשון הרע, אמר ליוחנן בן קרח, שקר אתה דובר על ישמעאל. What happened? Yochanan ben Karach came to Gedalia and he warned him. He said, this guy's, you're going to be killed. He wants to kill you. Said Gedalia, I'm not listening. I'm not listening to Lashon Hara. I'm going to take the act, which seems like Chassidut, that a person doesn't want to listen to something negative. We shouldn't, in general, we shouldn't listen to Lashon Hara. But that was a mistake, because, says the Ramchal, he says, even though a person tells you something negative about somebody else, you're forbidden to believe it, but you're allowed to suspect it. And again, without getting into all the conditions, the technicalities, but he was allowed to suspect it. He should have suspected and taken precautions. He didn't. As a result, he was killed. So this was therefore not an act of Chassidut. This was an act of folly. He says, "Ma garam shehu met v'nifzuru Yisrael v'kabag echalatam nish'ara." It's a language. Yeah, Ramchal said more or less the Rambam says the same language. He says, what happened? Gedalia was killed. Am Yisrael was scattered. The last embers of sovereignty were extinguished. So if you go in the Tanakh and you see the story there, Gedalia was not the only person who was killed, others were killed as well. And the Pasuk implies that he was responsible. He wasn't the one who killed them, but through his actions, indirectly led to their death as well. So that is one case of Gedalia ben Achikam, says the Ramchal, where there was mistaken Chassidut. The person says, I'm going to go above and beyond. I'm not even going to hear. I'm not even going to suspect that this is Lashon Hara, which is being told, even though the letter of the law is you can suspect because there's a important practical toilet that's coming out of it. That is one case. The second case, which will be familiar to you all because we discussed it at length last week, is the case of Kamtzan bar Kamtza, story of Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkulas at the end. I'm going to repeat the whole thing now, but says the Ramchal, he says, Beit Sheni. So Gedalia was in the case of times of Beit Rishon, first Beit HaMikdash. Kamtzan bar Kamtza was times of Beit Sheni. He says, Beit Sheni gamu chalai v'ledei chasidut kazeh. This was also false chasidut. Again, false piety that led to this. Asher lo nishkal b'mishkal tzedek. But again, it wasn't balanced, it wasn't evaluated in the proper way. Because we have the story of Kamtzan bar Kamtza at the end. Says the Gemara, Savu Rabbanan Lekruve, right? They thought about bringing this korban, even though it had a mum. Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkulah said, no, you can't do that. They thought about killing Bar Kamtza because he was a Rodef. So again, so Rabbi Zechariah, no, you can't do that. And again, all he was trying to do was do the right thing. Not Rabbi Zechariah was trying to be a chassid, saying we can't go beyond and we can't perform these actions, even though discussed last week. Even though maybe it's pekuach nefesh, but nonetheless, he thought it would be extra bias not to do it, and we all know what the results were of that. And therefore, says the Ramchal, when you're looking at an action, again, which goes beyond the strict letter of the law, to know whether this is an act of chasidut or it's an act of folly, to know what you should do. Don't look at what you're doing right now, but look how it goes beyond. You have to look at all the outcomes to know it's better now to act or not to act. So there's a pasuk that we say, pasuk we mentioned just about every fast, the pasuk in Zechariah, it talks about the 4 fasts that we have. Navi Zechariah says, Ko amar Hashem tzvakot tzoma ravi'i, tzoma chamishi, tzoma shvi'i, v'tzoma asiri, yeh lebeit Yehuda l'sason v'simcha l'moadim tovim. All the fast days we have in future will be transformed into days of happiness, into days of celebration, into festivals. We think so. That's the famous part of the pasuk. But the pasuk doesn't end there. There's another 3 words. Continues the Navi Zechariah. He says, "V'ha'emet v'shalom ehavu." You should love emet, truth, and shalom, and peace. Why specifically emet and shalom? What is the addition here of the Navi? Why is it that the fast days will turn into festivals only when we'll have emet and shalom? Again, there are many different principles, many different foundations of Torah. Why specifically these 2? So it could be, Nevis will suggest the following, that these 2 cases that we just spoke about, one in Beit Rishon, by Gedaliah ben Achikam, and the second one in Beit Sheni, Kamsa bar Kamsa, both acts of mistaken chasidut. Each one of them, we see one of these values of emet and shalom prioritized over the other incorrectly. Both of these are important. The difficulty is there are times in life when the 2 values clash. Emet and shalom don't work together. Sometimes emet has to be sacrificed for shalom. Sometimes shalom has to be sacrificed for emet. The chokhmah is knowing when and how and in what degree. But if you look back at the stories again, you see Gedaliah sacrificed essentially emet. He favored shalom over emet. You want to tell me something negative about another person? I'm not going there. Even though the emet, the truth is, you should have listened. You should have protected yourself. Shalom. For the attempt for shalom, he mistook that. We go to the case of Rabbi Zechariah when it comes to Kamsa bar Kamsa, exactly the opposite problem. That Rabbi Zechariah favored the emet. He said the truth, the absolute truth is that it's not the korban should not be brought, right? The person should not be harmed, even though doing that, sacrificing the truth in that instance would have brought about shalom ultimately. And therefore, says Navi Ha'emet v'Shalom Ehavu. We need both. It's not we don't live in a world that's one absolute emet or absolute shalom. Again, they come in conflict, and if one loves both values, understands both are so important, and tries to chase after them as much as we can, hopefully through that we'll be able to understand where to sacrifice one over the other in what proportion, and by that to come to real chasidut, not to chataim. And these fast days again really should be transformed soon in our days to days of simcha and moadim tovim. וחנניה בן הקשה אומר את הקדוש ברוך הוא לזכות ישראל לפי איך בא להם תורה מצוות שנאמר אדוני חפץ למען צדקו יגדיל תורה ויגדיל